Hello, everybody, and welcome back to an off-season edition of the Kelly Green Hour as the Philadelphia Eagles have two new assistant coaches at the offensive and defensive coordinator positions, which we will talk about in a minute. As always, I'm your host, LJ Harrell, and I am joined by my co-host, Connor Donald. Connor, we took a couple-week break, kind of needed it after the season that the Eagles had personally for both of us that we've had. But it's good to be back, man. It's good to talk to you and good to talk about the Eagles. Hopefully in a positive manner. We'll see how this goes. But yeah, how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm more positive about these hirings than some other people are. I'll just leave it at that. So all people make this flow pretty positively. But I mean, talking about coordinators, you can't be any more upbeat and more positive after suffering through what we did last year. Any hire feels like a good hire, but it is good to be back. And there's been some really good football happening, despite the Eagles not being involved. There's been some pretty good football games going on around us. So we'll definitely react to some of those and give our Super Bowl prediction too.
Yes, we definitely will. It's the Chiefs and the Niners. Almost 4 years to the. It was a leap year in 2020 when it happened. We have a leap year Super Bowl or a leap year here in 2024, and it's the same two teams. We'll see who. Obviously, our Super Bowl predictions didn't come true. I think I had Eagles, Bengals. I don't remember who you had.
I think I had Eagles Chiefs. I had a rematch,
Okay,
and
so you
that
got
did
half of it
not.
right.
I was looking okay for a little bit, but yeah, no. Then the collapse.
Oh yeah, duh. And before we get into the collapse and why the Eagles have new coordinators, as always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. Follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. And if you're tuning in live, let us know your thoughts on Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator, Vic Fangio, the new defensive coordinator, and your Super Bowl pick. Who you're gonna root for in what are we 12 days away from the Super Bowl. All right, Connor. Let's start on the defensive side of the football. The Eagles hired Vic Fangio after Fangio wanted to ask the Dolphins if he could, I guess, be released from his contract. He's from Pennsylvania, wanted to move closer to work closer to be with family or be closer to family. He's a huge Phillies fan. After the Eagles decided to get rid of Sean Desai and Matt Patricia, there was a lot of talk of the Eagles going away from the Fangio defense, trying to get somebody maybe that like a Wink Martindale, maybe bring in Denard Wilson, somebody of that ilk. They went out and got the godfather of the Fangio defense in, Vic Fangio himself. Obviously, last year in the Super Bowl season, he was here, but he was here in a consulting matter, but he was helping the offense. He wasn't helping the defense. He was helping the offense, helping Shane Steichen devise if the Chiefs are if Spags is gonna throw this at me, what do you think I should do? Now they go out and they go and get Fangio. You're gonna if there's one thing that the Eagles are gonna get out of Fangio is they are going to be prepared. There was a lot of issues in training camp last year where Nick Sirianni had to I don't want to say call out Sean Desai, but he kind of had to be like, hey, what's going on? Because there were some substitution issues. You're not going to see that with Vic Fangio. Fangio is also bringing in so far experience. Clint Hurt, he was the defensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks last year. Has been a defensive. He's got hired as a defensive line coach with the Eagles. He's been a defensive line coach in the NFL. He has experience as a defensive coordinator as well. And it's a different type of system because he's going to bring some of that Seattle ilk with him. So you're going to be able to merge a couple of things. They also bringing in Carl Scott as a defensive back coach, I believe. He was with Seattle as well, but was with Alabama beforehand. He worked with Josh Jobe. He helped recruit Kool-Aid McKinstry, Terry, and Arnold. He worked with Patrick Surtain when Surtain was with the Alabama Crimson Tide. So the one thing that was
Diggs as well.
Who? Eli
Trayvon
Ricks?
Diggs as well.
Oh, Trayvon. Yeah, you're right. Trayvon Diggs, not Eli Ricks. Trayvon Diggs. The one thing we're seeing about the staff that Sirianni or Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, whoever's putting it together, is experience. You have 25 years of experience between obviously most of that's Fangio, between Vic Fangio and Kellen Moore compared to, what was it, 1 year, 2 years of experience when it was Brian Johnson and Sean Desai going into last year. What are your thoughts on Vic Fangio and kind of maybe at the beginning of the search, it looked like they were going to go away from the Fangio system, But now they got Fangio. It's his system. He's going to bring that experience and bring the know-how and know what to do in certain situations instead of having an underling, somebody that just studies from him.
I mean, I love the hire. I mean, I get it. There's a lot of people who are like, oh, here we go again, a zone heavy defense. I mean, honestly, it feels like that's what the Eagles kind of move towards with any defensive coordinator, because we saw it from Jim Schwartz down. We've seen it for the last like 5 or 6 years. We're just a zone heavy team. That's just what we like to do. That just seems to be the type of coordinator they look for. The difference here, is that instead of more of a 4-3 base approach, you're going to be seeing more of a 3-4 base approach, which means there's probably a good chance that there has to be some value put on the linebacker position, because if we look at the same situation as this year, we are going to get eaten alive in a 3-4 scheme, probably worse than we got eaten alive this past year with the linebacker situation. But as far as Vic Fangio goes, I mean, you can't deny it. Experience, experience, experience. He's going to have you ready for games. He's going to demand respect. And I mean, you see the reports coming out of Miami right now. Ron Jaworski was talking today saying players just wanted to party. They didn't want to play. They didn't seem to want to play for Vic Fangio. They didn't seem to want to respect him. And so some of them, obviously not all of them, but Ron Jaworski made it sound like, it was this conglomerate of guys, whoever it is, they're obviously not saying any names, that, wanted him out, and they went directly to Mike McDaniel, and Mike McDaniel kind of like Miami kind of obliged and moved on from him. One of the things that may be frustrating with Vic Fangio that I recently saw was we could see the likes of Nolan Smith and Hassan Reddick drop back into coverage a little more than we want to see, because he did it a ton with defensive ends and outside linebackers and people you would expect to rush last year.
To cut you off, we saw the Eagles do that a lot with last year, but Fangio with Miami and Hurt with Seattle did that more than the Eagles. So
way more.
Even though there's a quote out there that Clint Hurt says he likes to see his pass rushers go forward, he doesn't want to see them backpedal. I mean, they did it. So hopefully they don't do it, but I mean, it's going to be part of the defense, unfortunately. But it shouldn't be like Patricia, where the first like 7 times in a game for Hassan Reddick. Better not happen.
And the hope is that it will be more methodical. Like at the end of the day, Fangio wants to trick offenses into falling into his scheme and making a mistake. So the hope is that it's going to be more methodical than Patricia and Desai, who just kind of just aimlessly drop these guys back into coverage with no rhyme or reason. Fangio does it with an attempted rhyme or reason to make the offense make mistakes, and we're going to see if he can make that. But I mean, the experience is good. He garners respect. He's going to put together. He's already started to put together an incredible staff around him. You talked about Scott. He isn't the defensive backs coach, but he is a senior assistant, which likely means he's also going to look after the defensive backs as a senior assistant defensive coach. But I mean, whatever you want to call it, he's coming in here as purely, like, you look back in his history, he was like a defensive assistant or a senior assistant / DBs coach. It always had something to do with DBs, safeties, corners, separate from DBs, but that was always his role back in college, all the way through to his time in the NFL with Seattle and stuff. So, I mean, he's coming in to work on a very, very weak secondary, or a secondary that struggled. I guess I wouldn't call it weak, but it's a secondary that struggled a lot and has some weaknesses that they need to work on. So hopefully he's going to be able to help clean that up. And Hurt, I mean, I think that's a great hire, because I mean, you need to maximize what you got in that front. It's going to be front 3, front 4, whatever you want to call it. You got to maximize those defensive tackles. And I think Hurt comes in as that hire to maximize Jordan Davis and to maximize Milton Williams and to maximize Jalen Carter and to really get the most out of those guys. He's not going to, I don't know if his focus will be as much on Nolan Smith, Hassan Reddick, Josh Sweat, maybe Josh Sweat if he's part of that front 3. But I think he's going to be there mainly to focus on the front 3, whoever's lining up as those 3 or 4 guys who are going to be rushing. And I think he can do a great job of it because all of his experience is along the defensive line. So they brought in Immediately, Fangio was a great hire, and then the first two hires to his staff were to two areas of glaring, not necessarily weakness, but areas that we expected more of and better of this past year. I would say, the cornerbacks, that's up for debate. I think it was a weakness. It truly was a weakness. The defense couldn't do anything because of that.
Mhm.
But the front three, front four, whatever you want to call it, should have been better, had to be better, needs to be better based on the investment that has been put into it. So especially the defensive tackles. And now with the three scheme, you're probably going to see a lot more of Jordan Davis. You're going to see a lot more of Jalen Carter, and you're probably going to see a lot more of Milton Williams as those three guys along the front. So those guys are going to really need to, you really need to maximize what you get out of them, because there was significant capital in two of them. Milton Williams, he did go as a pretty high third round pick, and unexpected third round pick. So obviously you need to get the most to maximize out of those. So the Fangio hire was good, and then the two right after that made sense as well.
So the one thing you mentioned about how the Dolphins players were kind of happy, I think it was more of the secondary than anything. Like it wasn't the front seven, I think, are fine with what Fangio's defense looked like. It was more of the secondary, which we really don't have a secondary right now. There are a bunch of free agents out there, like Jair Alexander's a free agent. We don't know what if Green Bay is going to tag him or try to re-sign him, so that could be a potential. If I think we're both of the belief that James Bradbury's gone. He should be gone post June 1st cut, but he definitely should be gone. Kevin Byard probably going to be gone. They can save some money by either restructuring or not bringing him back. And he was not good. And remember, when I was high on that trade when they brought him in, but he just was not good. They do need to get some. I would love Antoine Winfield Jr. I think he's going to go back to Tampa. I don't know why.
It's actually a good free agent safety class. Like if you're going to address it, I mean, there's a good chance to do it one time with a more high priced guy and then lower down the chip, because all we have next year is Reed Blankenship pretty much, and Sidney Brown, but he's not going to be there for the first 4 to 6 weeks. So technically all we have is pretty much one safety. Justin Evans is gone. Kevin Byard should be gone. Everyone's pretty much going off to free agency. So there's a chance to address it high up. And there's also the opportunity to, grab a lower tier guy, give a prove it guy another opportunity. And I mean, I still wouldn't rule out drafting. Like I would go pretty heavy. I mean, if there's a way that you can find to, like once the time comes to get Sidney Brown in, get him in. But if you address the position well enough that you can sit Sidney Brown for the year, go ahead. But I think we need Sidney Brown as well. I think Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown are really can be the future of the safety position there. Obviously, they have their weaknesses. Would we like to see them tackle a bit better with some technique? Definitely. But I mean, those two were clearly the two best safeties on the team this year, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah, and look, I would love, like in the first round, if the Eagles, if they were able to get like a Kool-Aid McKinstry or Terrion Arnold for at corner. I don't think there's a safety in the first round I would take. Obviously, we think linebacker, but they're not going to. I don't know if there even is one that's worth taking in the first round, but like second or third round potentially. And we'll talk about draft, a month or two down the road when we do our mock drafts and whatnot. A couple of the comments. Thank you guys for joining us. Michael says, all I know is Fangio's defenses rank high under him. For the most part, they do. When he was in Denver, they were good. Chicago, they were good. Miami's defense was, I think, top 10 last year, if I'm not mistaken, or top 12.
Elements of his defenses are always ranked high. You can tell, where the end of his time with the team or the end of a tenure comes, because they rank a little bit worse. But generally, they rank fairly well as they get comfortable. But at worst, when they're bad, they're like middle of the pack. They're not like bad like our defense last year with Desai bottom five almost across the board.
The third down defense won't be like 38th in the league out of 32 teams, because that's how bad they were last year. Todd says, because of all the new hires, do you think they will eventually move on from Sirianni? So I think Sirianni said, I'm pretty sure that the meeting that Sirianni and Jeffrey Lurie and Howie Roseman had is the same meeting that Doug Peterson, Sirianni, and Howie had. Doug said, hell no, I want to keep Press Taylor. And they were like, kick rocks. And Sirianni was like, yes, I like being a head coach. I'll be your yes man. I'll do whatever you want me to do. Obviously, it's not exactly how that went, but that's how I'm thinking. it all went down. Sirianni is happy to be a head coach. He's willing to be the yes man. He's willing to be the puppet. So he's going to go out there and um, he's going to go and make whatever moves he needs to make so he can stay as the head coach. Obviously, it didn't work last year, and we're not going to know this, but I would love to know what Jalen Hurts' thoughts. There was a report that Jalen and Brian Johnson weren't seeing eye to eye, and Jalen kind of freelanced last year. But I would love to hear what Jalen's thoughts are on Brian Johnson getting canned. Like, what is how is that going to impact the relationship between your $255 million quarterback and the head coach? But then you think about it, Brian Johnson has gotten some interviews, hasn't gotten hired, but has some offensive coordinator interviews. Sean Desai has had some defensive coordinator interviews. What does that say about them? What does that say about Nick Sirianni? What does that say about the team last year, the coaching staff last year? That's like damning that they're still getting interviews after the atrociousness of how last year went, how last year ended. And then, if Sirianni would have gotten let go, do you think he would have got a head coaching interview? I'm not 100% sure he would have.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sold Sirianni would have got the interview. I mean, you look what's out there, you look what's still out there, and there's only two jobs left. I mean, Ben Johnson's off the board now because he's going back to Detroit. But obviously, there's still got like Mike Vrabel's there, Bill Belichick's there. It looks like Vrabel may be back to a defensive role. It looks like Belichick's going to step back for a year. Like it really looked like it was a really aggressive head coaching market. And I don't know if Sirianni was going to get it this year, but in future seasons, there's a chance Nick Sirianni was going to get that opportunity again. I agree with you. I mean, it speaks volumes, I think, to this team. I mean, Brian Johnson, super well respected. There was rumors from like the middle of the season he was going to get looked at for head coaching jobs. Of course, everything went downhill really fast. So now instead of head coach, he got his head coach interviews with a couple teams, got passed on, obviously. But I mean, now he's getting offensive coordinator looks. Sean Desai was extremely well respected heading into this season. I think things just didn't go well. Whether it was he didn't have the right players, whether he didn't have the right scheme, whatever you want to say, it just didn't work for Sean Desai in Philadelphia. But he's still extremely well respected. And if he doesn't get a DC role, if neither of them get an OC or DC role again, they're getting another role in a coaching staff, and I guarantee their names come up again next year in offensive and defensive coordinator discussions. It's a gimme that it happens. I feel like there's a lot of teams who maybe are starting to put together their staffs or who have their staffs in place that, would have been like, I would have had that guy as my DC, or I would have had that guy as my OC if I knew that they were going to become available. Unfortunately, hindsight being 2020, you don't know that that's going to happen. Similar to the Vic Fangio, Jonathan Gannon situation last year. You don't know what's going to happen sometimes in these circumstances. But I guarantee this is not the last you hear of Johnson or Desai's name in coordinator and head coaching, circles and opportunities. I guarantee it's going to happen. And I guarantee someday they're going to get an opportunity to show what they got, and they're probably going to look a hell of a lot better than they looked this year in Philadelphia. I just have that feeling. You just know it almost always happens with Philadelphia staff that falters or fails early on in their time in Philadelphia. Do I think they will eventually move on from Sirianni? I agree with you. I think that meeting was Nick Sirianni, whereas Doug Peterson went in hard-headed, Nick Sirianni said, I got you. I know exactly what you want me to say. He said, give up the offense? Absolutely. I'm talking to some offensive coordinators, experienced offensive coordinators, well-respected offensive coordinators. I'm going to hire one of those guys. Defensively, you want me to get rid of Matt Patricia? Well, Matt Patricia not under contract, unlike a lot of people didn't realize. So he's gone, out of the picture. You want me to get rid of Sean Desai? I got rid of him like 6 weeks ago. So obviously he went into that conversation 100% clearly knowing I know exactly what to say to you. You want me to be your puppet? You want me the guy that goes in front of the media and takes the punches if things aren't going well next year? 100%. Does this position the Eagles well if they go flat-footed again next year and mid-season they're sitting there saying, is it time to move on from Sirianni, and they fire him mid-season? Are they set up well after the fact with guys like Fangio and Moore in the picture? 100%. It doesn't mean they're moving on from him, but it sets them up to have a very good interim or a pair of very good interim coaches who can handle this situation if Sirianni's out of the picture, unlike sometimes other teams who end up with no interim coach or throwing these random interim coach tags around. I just don't think Sirianni's on the move yet. And It's really not like the Eagles to fire in season or make very dramatic moves in season. So I
They did with
don't know.
Chip.
Like they did with Chip, but that had to happen. Sirianni, you would have to have that collapse continue well into next season
So
to
if they
see
started 2 and
Sirianni go.
6, they start 2 and 6 next year.
I think you'd see him go because you've Fangio in place, you have more in place. The staffs are building are already looking exceptionally well. I think you'd see Sirianni go if you are well below 500 at any point at the midway point of the season.
Yeah. So, yeah. So you're right. I don't, unless the season starts off really bad, he'll probably go through. But the thing about Ben Johnson, like, it's 2 off seasons in a row that he has declined to become a head coach and stay with Detroit. The Eagles now, like, if the season goes haywire and they decide to get rid of Sirianni, like, Ben Johnson's there. Ben Johnson is there for an interview and potentially could be your next head coach. So, like, it's good that he didn't go to Washington. So he could potentially, like, he's there if you were to get rid of Sirianni. Daniel, afternoon or good evening. How you doing, bud? Mike says.
And I'll make one more comment and say that take my words with a grain of salt because I came back from my leave of absence and said there's no way both these coordinators get fired. And I think the week after, Desai lost play calling duties, and now both of them are not coordinators for the Eagles. So
you came back and the Eagles season went downhill. No offense. What's up, Daniel? Mike says if you had a choice between Patrick Queen from Baltimore, or I'm guessing Sneed from the
L'Jarius Sneed, yeah.
In free agency, which one would you pick? I want Patrick Queen. Look, we have guys in the secondary. Now, we've always talked about quality over quantity or quantity over quality. Slay will be back, and I think he's going to be better next year. Bradbury will be gone. I like Ringo. I like Ricks. We don't have a linebacker. I would take Patrick Queen yesterday. So my answer is Patrick Queen. He would give you that. He's young. He would give you that stalwart in the middle of the defense. The guy. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if they bring in Van Ginkel because I think he's a free agent. Played under Fangio last year, so knows the defense, can help teach it. But I would love Patrick Queen. He's just going to command a lot of money.
Yeah, and Van Ginkel had a career year under Fangio last year. So Queen or Snead, both of these guys are going to demand a ton of money. So who's going to give you the best value for your buck? I'm going with L'Jarius Sneed. I think, Darius Slay, his time's coming to an end too. Was his season bad? It was rocky last year, but it wasn't that bad. I do like L'Jarius Sneed more. To get a guy, Sneed will cost you more than Queen. Queen has demanded some money, but Sneed is definitely cornerbacks in a pass-friendly league are worth a lot more money. And I would love to have that sorted out. Like, I mean, I get it. There's people love Ricks and Ringo and think one of them's the future. Yes, one of them's the future. Sure. But what are we doing at the slot cornerback position? Is Avonte Maddox coming back? When he comes back, how long do you have him before he gets? And you got Isaiah Rodgers too. But how long does he stick around? If he has a good year, he has his 1 year. What if he has a really good year and how he doesn't want to pay him? L'Jarius Sneed locks up one of those cornerback positions for insert the year for that amount of time that you would have him under contract. Eventually, Slay will be out of the picture. What will Rodgers look like after being off for a full year? He had a really good year. I get it, but that was 2 years ago now. He's been suspended for a full season. He's going to be coming back. Ricks and Ringo, I think, and I said it back when we were talking about them earlier in the season, I think one of them will hit, but how well do they hit is the question. Are they going to be a stud cornerback for this team, or are they just going to be that second outside cornerback? And we have to insulate them with that stud cornerback. L'Jarius Sneed answers a huge question about the cornerback position, and then you don't have to draft cornerback early. You can look at safety, you can look at linebacker, you can look at other positions. And I think, I mean, obviously we've seen through some drafts, you can draft the cornerback and get the stud cornerback. But I mean, someone who's already had that true success in the NFL, I'm all for Sneed and taking that opportunity. Not to discount Queen. I would love to have Queen. You need to address both positions. There has to be something happen at the cornerback position through free agency or the draft, and there has to be multiple somethings that happen at the linebacker position through the draft and through free agency. So both need to be addressed. And would I be upset with either of those? 100% not.
And again, I said Queen because we don't have anything at linebacker. At least we have something at the cornerback position.
We have Nakobe Dean, but again,
we don't have anything at the linebacker position. I like Nakobe Dean, but like imagine Queen and Dean playing next to each other. Like I think that would help Nakobe Dean. So like,
I don't
and
think Nakobe Dean is LB1. I think there's
tactically
an
he is though.
LB1 to be had out there for the Eagles.
Uh, and look, we're not. Me and you we don't agree on everything, and this is one of the like. I think I mean as a DB, I probably would rather have Jair Alexander over Snead. So like I would go Queen, probably over both of them, and then be like Alexander and then Snead. That would be my maybe throw in Darnell Savage because he's a safety that's a free agent as well. But yeah, Todd says, how about Sirianni's relationship with the players? Does he have to regain respect or does he lose the team? You know, at the end of now, there's players that potentially might not be back, but Fletcher Cox, Jason Kelsey, Hassan, like there were a bunch of players that stuck up for Sirianni. I don't. I think that whole Sirianni and needing to or losing the respect of the locker room thing is kind of overblown. I don't think he lost. They didn't like the coordinators. Sean Desai overcomplicated the defense, threw a bunch of stuff at them, and that's why they looked as lost as they did. Fangio won't do that. Fangio is going to simplify it where he needs to simplify it. Brian Johnson, I don't know. Was it Sirianni's offense or was it him calling the play? It doesn't matter. But there was a disconnect between Brian Johnson and Jalen Hurts. So again, the whole respect between Sirianni and the locker room, I think is totally overblown. Are there a couple players here and there that might? Yeah, you're not going to not 100% of the locker room is not going to like the head coach. So like it just doesn't happen. So Sirianni, I think isn't going to have to win them back over. He can be the same guy he is, and everybody that's saying that like he can't be the CEO type because like why are you keeping him? I'm not comparing him to these coaches, but Mike Tomlin, John Harbaugh, Dan Campbell. I think he's better than Dan Campbell, but like Dan Campbell, like they don't call plays. They run, they coach the team. I think Sirianni can do that. Let Kellen Moore close to offense, and we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. Let Vic Fangio coach the defense, and let him watch over the entire team. I have no issue with that, and I think it's overblown that he has to try to get the respect of the locker room back. Your thoughts?
I agree with you 100%. I was going to say that exact same thing, that I think it was more to do with the coordinators rather than Nick Sirianni. I think Sirianni has the respect of more of the guys returning in that locker room than he has lost the respect of them. I don't think that he needs to gain a whole lot back. He just needs to get the right guys in place to get them back to their winning ways and get some well-respected and experienced coaches to get the maximum amount out of these players. And so far, Sirianni, Fangio are doing that. We haven't seen a whole lot of Kellen Moore and what that offense is going to look like, that offensive staff is going to look like. But I can tell just by the way the defense is going, they knew defense was the one that needed the major overhaul. There may be some of the offensive personnel who stay. So it'll be interesting to see as the season goes on, but I don't think Nick Sirianni ever lost respect to most of these guys. Like you said, is everyone going to love him? No, but I would say there's less. I would say you can count on two hands or less the number of guys who would say that they lost respect for Nick Sirianni and wouldn't play for the guy. Whereas I think you're going to need a lot more than two hands to count the guys who will defend him and go out there and play for him again next season.
Yeah.
By the way, while speaking about coaches, Bobby Slovic restructured his deal and is staying in Houston. So
the two hot
pool of
offensive coordinator jobs or two hot offensive coordinator names are staying. Ben Johnson staying with Detroit, Slovic staying with Houston, and that's big for those quarterbacks in those offenses, especially CJ Stroud in Houston. Mike says this is a make or break year next season for Sirianni. I agree. If they falter early, he could be gone. If they don't make the playoffs, he's going to be gone. What are your thoughts on Kaylee Ringo? Todd asked, is he overrated? I don't think he's overrated. He was a rookie. Cornerback is probably the hardest position, especially as a rookie, to come in and play. I think him and Ricks and like the young guys got a lot of valuable playing time, a lot of valuable experience, and that's going to help them this year. And I think that Ringo has a chance to be a starter this year. We both think Bradbury is going to be gone. Slay will probably be back. They probably will potentially draft somebody. They have three of the top 53, 54 picks. Maybe one of them is a corner. But I do think Ringo has a chance to play. What do you think, Connor?
I agree with you. I don't think he's overrated. And I mean, I think like he was a guy who had a first round grade on him. He ended up falling to the third round. There's probably reasons why he fell there, but at the same time, there was reasons he at one point was projected to go in the first round. So you can find that fine line in between. I don't think he's overrated. Nor do I
I mean, he
think
was
Eli.
undrafted, so
And nor do I end up thinking like Ricks was overrated either. I think one of these guys, like I've been saying since they
Ringo went fourth
started,
round. I'm sorry.
yes, since I've been saying since this whole situation, this Ringo Ricks getting snaps started, that I think one of them will end up succeeding. One of them will be the starting cornerback for this team 1-2 years down the road. Maybe not next year, maybe the year after. But once Darius Slay moves out of the picture, I think one of the Ricks or Ringo is going to end up in a starting role. And they both had really good games. Did they have some moments? 100%. Did they have some really good games that made your jaw kind of drop? Based on draft capital and the investment that we had in them, 100%. So do I think they're overrated? No. If you start sitting there saying Ringo or Ricks is going to should be CB1, step aside Darius Slay, it's all in how you say it. Then I would say you're out of your mind. But right
Maybe in a
now,
couple
no, they're
years,
not overrated.
but maybe in a couple years, one of them can be the cornerback one.
I absolutely think one of them can be. So
Michael asked, "What about the possibility of trading for Buda Baker?" We love it. We always talk about it.
the Buda Baker dream, it's still
So
alive.
2 years ago, they traded for CJ GJ, who I would like back, by the way. He's a free agent. Last year, they traded for Kevin Byard. Do they sign somebody in free agency? And you mentioned this is a good free agent class for safeties. Do they trade for somebody? We'll see. I would love CJ GJ to come back. I don't know if he would. He might want to stay in Detroit. Who knows? But they do have to do something. We mentioned it before. They have to do something at the safety position because they have Reed Blankenship, Tristan McCollum, like Sidney Brown's hurt, as you mentioned. It's going to be bare at the safety position. So they're going to have to do something, whether it's a trade, whether it's signing somebody, whether it's drafting somebody. I would like to sign somebody with experience, even if you draft somebody, but you might not have to because say you pair Reed Blankenship with a veteran guy, a Darnell Savage, a Reed Blank, or excuse me, a CJ GJ, somebody like that, and then Sidney Brown comes back week 7, week 8. I think that'd be a really good group of safeties that you could have out there. But they definitely have to make a move at the safety position.
Yeah, I mean, I think like linebacker, safety, cornerback, there's multiple, maybe cornerback, not multiple, maybe just one move that needs to be made. But linebacker, safety, I mean, there's a lot of free agents. While we sit there and say, oh, I wouldn't bring many of them back, they do leave voids on the roster. There's a lot of openings on that roster that people that are going to need fill in. How they address it, whether it be through undrafted free agents, free agency, the draft, how he decides to address these, linebacker and safety have multiple somethings. Because at this point, Reed Blankenship and Sidney Brown should be the only ones coming back. And Brown is going to probably miss some time to start the season. Linebacker, we have no one coming back. I'd be happy with Cunningham coming back, but there's still about 3 or 4 somethings that need filled in that linebacker room. So I definitely think a possibility of trading for Buda Baker. I mean, would Jonathan Gannon part ways to make the Eagles better? I don't know. How spiteful is the man? That's a tough call to make. But if the price is right, you never know. But Gannon knows the Howie way, and he's probably going to go to his manager and be like, don't try and don't pinch pennies with this guy. Like, make sure you get top dollar for Buda Baker. We know what he is. We know what he's got. So I don't know. I'm stuck on the Gannon and the Gannon history with Philadelphia, and I don't know if he would let his manager pull the trigger on something without getting more than how he would be willing to give up. But the safety position definitely has to be addressed big time.
If the trade, then not much you can really do about that.
That's true. This is true.
We've been really stuck on the defense. We will talk about Kellen more in a minute. Michael says, "What's your feeling about Frankie Louvu, the free agent backer from the Panthers?" I haven't really had a chance to look. Have you had a chance? Look, they have to do something at linebacker. They don't have anybody. Ben Van Summering pretty much is coming. It's him, I think. But like Leonard's gone. Cunningham had a decent year, but like for Eagle standards, which isn't very high. They could potentially bring him back. Nakobe Dean obviously couldn't stay healthy. Hopefully he stays healthy. He'll be on the roster. Nick Morrow probably won't be on the roster. So they do have to overhaul the linebacker position. Again, we mentioned Patrick Queen. There are a couple guys out there. We'll see what moves they decide to make. I mean, Van Ginkel obviously was mentioned, had a career year under Fangio last year. But what do you think? What are your thoughts on Louvu?
I mean, I like Louvu. He's a really good outside linebacker. I mean, I mean, it sucks because I feel like we're gonna have to add some inside linebackers, some specialists in that area, and some outside linebackers and some specialists there because you're gonna have to kind of insulate the Hassan Reddicks of the world and the Nolan Smiths of the world, who are not that great. They're more of the Russian linebackers. They're not the guys who are going to drop back in coverage and be all that effective. Even though Vic Fangio's defense is going to make them do that, we're going to have to get some semi-effective linebackers who specialize very specifically outside and inside. Frankie Louvu's been a pretty good outside linebacker, back-to-back seasons with over 100 tackles, back-to-back seasons with 5+ sacks. 3 forced fumbles over the last 2 seasons, 20 quarterback hits over the last 2 seasons. I mean, it's not a bad pickup, but we have to remember Howie and the price to pay for a linebacker is a big question. Is he going to start to value the linebacker more to pay for a Queen or a Louvu, or is he going to decide I'm still going to be cheap at the linebacker position? But I think this is a year, this is the defense that he's going to have to pay up. He's going to have to shore up the middle of the field because the middle of that field, a zone-heavy scheme, a Vic Fangio scheme, he has to be able to have that middle of the field be defended and respected.
And Howie's the king of over. I don't want to use the word overreaction. Overcompensating. Remember, he didn't draft SEC players and then went all Georgia and Alabama for a while. Like, maybe it's going to be tough though because you have a quarterback making $50 million a year, even though it offset it a little bit. You have a receiver making $25 million a year. You're going to have to pay another receiver. That's going to be close to $100 million per year on 3 players on offense. And that doesn't include your tight end. Landon Dickerson's going to have to get paid. Jordan Mailata is probably going to have to get paid again.
Lane Johnson's getting paid.
So, like, if you're going to pay somebody on defense who doesn't get paid on offense or gets moved on offense is the big question. Michael asked, after CJGJ's comments about the fans, would he be welcome back? Hell yeah, he would. No question about it, he would be welcome back, especially if he is picking the ball off, which is something we didn't do this year.
Yeah, I mean, you think about the skill. Don't think about what the guy said. Would CJGJ be able to, and his representation be able to figure out a Howie Roseman contract and respect a Howie Roseman contract to come back? I don't know. That's a different question to be asked. But would he be welcomed back by fans? I would welcome him back. I want talent. I don't care. Whatever you said, let bygones be bygones.
100% agree. Todd says, will Howie's first 3 picks be all for the defense? Answer, no. It wouldn't shock me if the first pick's an offensive lineman. They're not. It's not going to be all defense. Should it be all defense? Like, should they go the Matt Rule route? Remember when Matt Rule's first year with Carolina? All their picks were defense. Literally every single one was a defensive pick. No. And again, they have 3 of the first 53, 54 picks. One of them is going to be an offensive player, probably offensive lineman. But yeah, it won't be all defense, even though it should be. Hopefully they can get like Trotter Jr. in the second round, maybe. But it wouldn't shock me if 2 of the 3 were offense, just because they prioritize offense over defense in the NFL anyway.
Yeah, so the question should, yes. Will likely not. But I mean, it all depends on what he's able to swindle at a free agency. Is he going to be able to get some good deals on defensive players? It's all going to be. We can do a million mock drafts right before free agency, all we want, and it's going to look nothing like, and then our mock drafts are going to be so different as soon as free agency is over. Mm-hmm. To me, it's all about what does he address in free agency? How does he choose to handle free agency? Defense has way more holes than offense. There needs to be a focus on defense and spending there with free agency through the draft. There's much less of a need offensively with who you have coming back. I mean, do you have to figure out paying Devontae Smith? Yes. Do you have to address wide receiver depth? Yes. Do we have no running backs coming back? And we should probably address that. likely. We do have Kenneth Gainwell coming back, but we lose Boston Scott. I lost. I use that very lightly. But we lose DeAndre Swift, who was our best rusher. So what do you do at that? The biggest hole there is going to be if Kelsey doesn't come back, what do you do at the center position and then the running back position?
Well, the right
Otherwise,
guard position, because Jurgens will go to center.
yeah, however they decide to do that, you're gonna have a hole on it on an offensive line that's been really good, and you're gonna have to address that. Running back, I mean, you lose your best running back, you got to address that, but you can be a bit cheaper with that. We've seen that. But I do think, like, should the first 3 picks in the draft be defense at this very moment? Yes. Come join us 2 weeks into free agency and let's talk about it. Mine and LJ's answers are probably gonna be very different then.
Probably. Michael asks, I see Howie restructuring I see Howie restructuring a few contracts and extending contracts to come up with more money for free agency. Yeah. Hassan Reddick, you can extend him. He can you can open up cap space. Getting rid of Bradbury as opposed to June 1st might give you
You don't save any of that. I think you save like 700,000.
Kevin Byard, if you release him,
he's huge. He's huge.
That's like 13 million. But yeah, so he will. That's what they typically do. What about moving on?
But yeah, Michael. Just as a response, and with all due respect, obviously, Howie restructures and plays with money all the time. Before what is free agency? Is it March 16th or whatever? Before free agency, he will have restructured and extended at least 5+ contracts. I promise you.
They're at like 20 some odd mil right now, but they'll be at like 50 mil by the time free agency starts. What about moving on from AJ Brown and his
no?
Answer is 100% no. We've waited so long to get a receiver of Terrell Owens' ability, and we finally have him. Not getting rid of him.
And I mean, if this guy literally is just he's the way he was because he said enough with this media shit. Good. It's about time that somebody didn't give the Philly media what they want and comments that they can take out of context. That's all AJ was doing, was just staying away from the media circus that is Philly. Look at what some of these people said. Some of these people said things, and I read it, and I said, this makes 100% sense. This is perfect. And then the next day, WIP or, some guys in the Philly Inquirer or other places took the context of what was said and made it into something it was not. And that is just what the Philly media does. So if you don't want to talk to them because you don't want bullshit, good. His antics were not antics that were detrimental to the team. They just hurt the media because the media was upset that he wouldn't talk. So they created stories.
Well, thank you for bringing up an offensive player. Finally, we can transition real quick into the new offensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, who was the offensive coordinator in Dallas for 4 years. And I was the offensive coordinator for the Chargers last year. Look, he's going to bring some creative ideas. At least I think he's going to bring some creative ideas. There's been a bunch of people saying, oh, he's actually going to run the ball. He's a guy that wants to pass the ball. So we'll see about that. They will be under center a little more. They'll use, I don't know if you saw they had the passing charts for or the route tree for Keenan Allen, and then compared it to what the route tree for Devontae Smith looked like. It was night and day. So AJ Brown, when he's back, and Devontae Smith are going to be running so many different routes. What Kellen Moore was able to do with CeeDee Lamb, getting him open in space, like they're going to use the entire field. It's not going to be the same routes being run on either side of the field, just sideline stuff. No, they're going to use the middle of the field. And I think that's really, it's going to help Jalen. He should also have blitz beaters in his offense, something we've been clamoring for since Sirianni got here. So as long as Sirianni's not the one that's, we're not using Sirianni's offense, we're going to use Kellen Moore's offense. I do like the hire. I think I'm always skeptical of bringing somebody that's associated with the Dallas Cowboys into Philly. And I know he had the 1 year in LA, but I'm still, and also, Dak Prescott had the most turnovers with Kellen Moore as his coordinator. So we saw Jalen have a lot of turnovers last year. He's probably going to, I'm not going to say he's going to lead the league in turnovers, but he might have a lot of turnovers again, but that could be just the nature of the offense, getting the ball down the field.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, hopefully Jalen Hurts is a smarter quarterback, the better quarterback, like we think he is over Dak Prescott, which I do think he is. It's just about scheming the players open and making sure that that he makes the right read and makes the right pass. I like the Kellen Moore hire. I think no matter what, Kellen Moore was out in LA because Harbaugh was coming in, and Harbaugh is
Yeah.
obviously going to bring all of his own people into the mix. But I do think you don't bring in a Kellen Moore and not be giving up control of the offense. I think that
And
and I mean what he's accomplished. Like I put it out there on our Kelly Green our Twitter page. I said I think this is the best coordinators we've had of the last 3 years where we've seen
I
three different
disagreed with one of
coordinators.
them.
I know you
Shane
disagreed
Steichen.
with Shane Steichen. Shane Steichen is a man with now, at the time, he had 11 and 12 years experience in the NFL. What Kellen Moore has accomplished in 5 years of experience in the NFL, I think is something to definitely take account of and to think about, because Kellen Moore has done a lot more in a lot less time. Shane Steichen had to work his way up, and finally got the opportunity and has proven extremely good. You can have the debate with Steichen and Kellen Moore, and we're going to see how this offense works this season and what type of job Kellen Moore is able to do. But I do just think, like you said, his offense schemes people open. It gives you blitz beaters. It gives you bailout options. It schemes people open the best that they can. It uses the middle of the field. It pushes the ball down the field fast. Which when Jalen Hurts wants to push the ball, he can push the ball and he can do it very well. I'm just tired of seeing him do it to a 50-50 ball. I think in this type of offense, it won't always be a 50-50 ball. There may be an opportunity to actually find wide open people down the field. And instead of getting a 50-50 ball that's a 35-yard gainer, it could be 35 plus. Like there's with run after the catch and stuff. So I'm really hoping, there's a lot of things to like about the offenses that we've seen. Of course, there's criticisms in all offenses. There's always going to be, but there's a lot of really good things to look for in that offense. And in his defense, last year, that offense was just rode off with injuries, constant injuries. Quentin Johnson was not who they thought he would be. I didn't think he was going to be a whole lot. He clearly isn't going to be, at least in the early going of his career. Mike Williams went down with the injury. Keenan Allen had to do all the heavy lifting. Austin Eckler was an extremely inefficient runner and missed a bunch of time as well. There was a lot of things working against him, whereas I personally think we have the better offense. We have the better offensive line. We have the better things to optimize Kellen Moore's offensive structure, an offensive scheme, and to get the most out of this offense.
And if you think about it, the last time we've hired an offensive coordinator from the Chargers, we've gone to the Super Bowl within 2 years. So we go back to 2016 when we brought in Frank Reich. 2017, we won the Super Bowl. 2018, he became the Colts coach. We bring in Steichen in 2021. 2022, we go to the Super Bowl. 2023, he becomes the Colts coach. So 2024, we bring in Kellen Moore, which means 2025, we go to the Super Bowl. 2026, he'll be the Colts coach if we're following history. Michael asked, how about Jonathan Taylor or Austin Eckler? The answer would be no. They're going
first of all, Jonathan Taylor signed an extension in the offseason, so
they're
he got an extension.
super,
Austin Eckler, did my comment answer your question?
Yeah,
Austin Eckler was ridiculously ineffective.
They're going to either bring back DeAndre Swift at a hometown discount or find a disgruntled running back to trade a 6th round pick for. Like they
just like DeAndre Swift. Swift was a bit more than a 6th rounder, but I mean, I'd pay that for that again. If you can find a disgruntled guy who's going to do what Swift did this past year, I do it again.
They don't pay running backs. They don't pay running backs in this offense. With Ben Johnson out of the running for the Commanders, does that open the door for Eric Bieniemy?
Ugh, who wants to work for the Commanders?
Well, I think that they want to go.
The fact they haven't turned to Bieniemy is very.
I think they want to go like defensive coach again for some reason, which doesn't make sense. Again, I know, and I get it. What the D'Amico Ryans did with Houston with a rookie quarterback, that's like I feel like a once in a lifetime thing. So it's not going to be Johnson. It's not going to be Slowick. Maybe they might just like have to give it to Bieniemy at this point. Is what it might come down to. But like, I think they wanted to interview Anthony Weaver from Baltimore. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think if Bieniemy gets it, it was kind of he was the last resort kind of thing where he kind of they just were like, all right, we have to hire somebody. It's going to be Bieniemy. He was already here. That's my guess on that. What do you think?
I mean, the fact Bieniemy is going to go through another cycle and probably not get a head coaching job is very interesting to me. I don't understand how this man has not been able to get the job, but I agree with you. I feel like in the building right now, Bieniemy, you have your offense settled. You need to figure out something on the defensive side of the ball, and I mean, there's a very good chance that you get a defensive minded head coach in the building again because it feels like all the offensive ones have gone back. So now all that you're going to end up sitting there being left with is defensive-minded coaches. And I agree with you. I wouldn't like a defensive-minded coach. I don't like defensive-minded coaches. This is an offensive-happy league. Sorry to the defensive-minded people, but this league favors offense. This league wants offense. It craves offense. So I would go for the offensive mind, but obviously the offensive minds are all returning, restructuring deals, and going back to their teams.
The two teams in the Super Bowl, Andy Reid, offensive coach, Kyle Shanahan, offensive coach.
And what does that say that these guys literally are going back to their jobs and the only two job openings left aren't the most appealing of job? Like, what does that say about Washington? They can't even get a guy like Ben. And there's reports out there that Ben Johnson's ask is too much. That when you're talking about the ask of a coach, who cares?
Yeah, there was no salary cap for a coach. I also think that was also like, I don't think he was really asking for that much money. I think that was also a little.
Unless it was like he was asking for personnel control, then I get it because I really don't like. We saw with Chip Kelly, we've seen Bill Belichick over the past couple of years. If you want personnel control, it doesn't seem to ever really work out.
I think Adam Peters is the guy that got hired by Washington. They could potentially just be waiting for somebody from San Francisco because that's where he came from.
Yep.
Who knows? All right, Todd asked, could we get a better backup quarterback? Mariota blows. I think we will. I don't think Mariota's back. I didn't mind Mariota. Like, he's a backup. I mean, obviously, we're kind of spoiled with the backups that we've had, with Nick Foles winning the Super Bowl. But I do think that it might be Tanner McKee as the backup, being his second year in the league. Michael asks, if Shanahan does not win the Super Bowl, his time in San Francisco mirrors Andy Reid's time in Philly. Yeah, and they should have lost to Detroit. Like, they definitely should have lost to Detroit. If Dan Campbell wasn't so risky,
hyper aggressive,
very aggressive, that would have been different. All right, That's
a good segue into Super Bowl prediction.
It is good. It is a good segue into Super Bowl predictions. The Kansas City Chiefs and the San Francisco 49ers. 40-winers, whichever you want to call them. What's the percentage of people in Philly that are going to be rooting for the Chiefs in this game? It's probably 95%.
Man, I've had people ask me and be shocked, and I'm like, I'm cheering for the Chiefs. I don't care about Taylor Swift. I love Andy Reid. It's about Andy Reid. I have so much respect for Reid. But even if the Lions made it, I honestly was still going KC. I have too much respect for Andy Reid. He did so much for Philadelphia, and I want to see him have this dynasty. I want to see him have this run. Good for him. Good on him.
He's on a track to supplant Bill Belichick as the greatest coach of all time.
I agree. We actually had this discussion.
I'm sorry to cut you. He has Patrick Mahomes, been the 6 straight AFC Championship games, been to the Super Bowl 4 of the last 5 years or something like that. 4 of the last 6. You think they get to a Super Bowl in the next 5 years? If he's the coach for the next 5 years, get back to the Super Bowl 3 more times? Like, he could break Shula's win record.
Yeah, no, and he's got a ton of wins. Like, I mean, I agree. Like, I think I just could never, like, unless it's like the only team I would cheer against the Chiefs, and I get it. All this stuff with Taylor Swift and all the things in the media, I get it. And it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with Andy Reid. I just want to see Reid win some more. He deserves it. He earned it.
I don't like San Francisco. I wanted the Ravens and Lions in the Super Bowl. That was my championship week pick, so I was wrong on both accounts because I like Lamar. And again, I don't have a disdain for the Chiefs. Like, obviously last year's Super Bowl sucked, but I can't stand the Niners and their fans and all the crying they did over the last year. And then for them to get to the Super Bowl, which kind of proves them right a little bit, kind of sucks. But you're taking the Chiefs. Do you have a score and the MVP?
I think I think it's gonna be a decently high scoring game. My MVP is gonna be Travis Kelsey. I mean, after last week, like 11, what was he, 11 for
11.
11 or something like
Yeah.
that? Like he had a huge night. You know that Mahomes is gonna turn to him a whole bunch again. Um, 10, probably another 10 reception game, 100 yards, at least one touchdown, something along those lines. I have it being a fairly high scoring game. I just think when push comes to shove, who do you trust with the ball in their hands up against the
Patrick Mahomes.
defense? Patrick Mahomes all day. Brock Purdy has not had that opportunity. Okay, he made the big comeback against the Detroit Lions, kind of self-induced by their head coach. But at the same time, if you have to try and score against this KC defense is better than the Lions defense. This
Yeah.
KC defense has just been unreal. So
And they,
I have
and they drafted most of those guys. Like that secondary was like rookies last year when they
Yep.
won the Super Bowl.
Pure building from just through the draft, from scratch. And so I got 34-31. I still think it's gonna be a high scoring game. I just think back against the wall, if you give Brock Purdy the ball with 2 minutes or less left, he ain't scoring. His odds of a turnover are better than his odds of getting the touchdown. If it's 2 minutes left and he needs 3 points, and it's Patrick Mahomes, he's getting 7.
And do you remember when people were saying that the Chiefs not having a receiver was going to be their downfall? And look, they're back in the Super Bowl. Yeah, I'm going to go Chiefs 27-17. And Patrick Mahomes will be the Super Bowl MVP.
That's kind of a blowout. Like from a Super Bowl standard, that would be pretty shocking.
27.
But I mean, that KC defense really good. So
it is good. It is good. All right, Connor, it was fun. Thank you everybody for the questions and the comments in the chat. We appreciate it. I didn't think we were going to hit an hour today, and we pretty much damn near did. We will be back, after the Super Bowl, when we get closer to free agency. We talk about what the moves that the Eagles make, what free agents we would like to see them, sign, and then when we get to draft season, do the draft shows, and do our mock drafts. As always, follow us on Twitter at Kelly Green Hour. Follow Connor on Twitter at Connor10. Follow me on Twitter at LJHarrell54. Follow Edge of Philly Sports on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook at Edge of Philly Sports. And as always, thank you again for the comments. Michael has the KC beating the Niners 36-27. So we have a lot of people on the Chiefs side, which doesn't surprise me because the Niners and their fans are a bunch of. I'll leave it at that. I won't say the word that I want to say. For Connor, I'm LJ. Thank you all for tuning in to the Kelly Green Hour.